So, this is going to be a follow-up. Hi, how are you? I hope everyone's good. I am, I'm okay. Weird day. Let's leave it at that. Now, I have been going over my old handbook of the Marvel Universe collections. Recently started picking them up, mainly because, this one, which covers, I don't know if you can tell, Abomination to the Circus of Crime. Hi. I picked up because Absorbing Man's in it. And Absorbing Man was reminded to me recently by some stuff. I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone, but there's a thing that's going on TV that sort of brought up Absorbing Man to me, so I thought I'd go and read about him. And this is also sort of a follow-up on the episode I did about superheroes in gaming. Now, I believe this is pronounced non-linguistor. I think that's how that's supposed to be pronounced. Non-linguistor. Actually made a suggestion, a counter to my normal advice, which was don't play existing characters. He suggested that he had a good time by making it his own, making Daredevil his own character, and then he could breathe life into it. And at first, I was like, well, maybe that's just him. And then I started thinking about, well, how would I make those characters my own? And then I realized that the problem I was having with that idea was I was thinking of it as a game exercise rather than a creative writing exercise. What I mean to say is, for instance, I could conceive of a world where I could write a Daredevil comic and have fun doing that. But I wasn't thinking of it in terms of that. I was thinking of it in terms of playing a game, and role-playing games are about personal identity in a lot of ways, in that you can explore different things about personal identity, and you can sort of express different things and try different things, but it's, there's a certain amount of personal involvement there, and that was sort of a roadblock in my head. The overall point is, if I think of playing an existing character as this is how I would write that character, it makes a lot more sense to me. So he got me thinking about it, is what I'm saying. And I thank him for that, because that I hadn't thought of it in that terms until I started sitting there and exploring it. So maybe that'll help somebody else with that notion. Now, I had this out. I love these things. I mentioned them before in the episode. The Handbook of the Marvel Universe was great. Now, when I got into comics, there had already been a number of comics out there. And, I was buying them at the spinner racks at the drugstore at that point, because they still did that. This is a long time ago, apparently. They don't do that anymore. But at the time, most of the time when you bought comic books, you bought it at like the drugstore or the convenience store, and they were on a spinner rack. And comic shops were things in distant cities, because I lived in small town Tennessee. We didn't really have a lot of comic shops near me. The nearest one was in Cleveland, Tennessee, which, nearest to where I was living at the time, that I started thinking about them, that I'd actually become really aware of them. There was one up in Oak Ridge as well, or not Oak Ridge, but Clinton, Tennessee, and yeah, if you don't know Tennessee, it is just going, I don't know what you're talking about. For a guy who didn't have a car, because I was a kid, these might as well have been on the moon for as often as I got to go see them. So my comics were coming from the spinner rack. That said, I got a hold of the floppy versions of this. This is a collection. I got a hold of these things, and you can see sort of what the covers were like back then. You'd have these amazing collections of heroes all in there. And one of the things that I loved about them was I could read about things in here that I hadn't encountered in the comics yet, but were cool. Or I could have something explained that, nobody had explained at that point. In this book, there is a history of adamantium. How it was developed, who developed it, what its capabilities are, all of those things. They were in these. I knew that Wolverine had adamantium claws, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know the history of it. I didn't know where it fit in the universe. I knew he had metal claws that were really sharp and hard to break. That's it. That's all I knew, because that's all I had read in the comics. I didn't understand the context of the metal. This allowed me to do that. This also allowed me to come across characters that I had not come across yet, but I thought, when I read about them, I thought they were the coolest thing ever. And then somewhere down the road would actually say, well, here's a story with this character that you read about in an official handbook once, years ago, and you can go, ha, I know that character. Right? So, Taskmaster is a good example of that. I had read about him, and I had no idea who that character was. Taskmaster is a character who has photographic reflexes. Which is to say, if he sees you do a thing, if it's physically possible for him to do it, he can do it. So, he would watch a bunch of training footage of, Bruce Lee, and watch fights between Captain America and other people, and, any footage he can show of a fight, and then he was instantly able to fight. If he wanted to be a gymnast, he'd watch a bunch of footage of Olympic gymnasts, and he would know how to do all the things they could do. Which is a great power, actually. It's kind of neat. I think Heroes did a rip on it at one point. But I read about him, and it was probably a decade or more before I actually saw him in a comic book story. It was just, he was in the comic, and I thought, well, that's a neat thing. He has a dumb costume, but that's a neat thing. So, I was going through this, and, I'm reading about the Celestials. The Celestials are interesting. Now, if you saw Guardians of the Galaxy, minor spoiler here, but it's been out long enough that I don't mind this minor spoiler, they go to a place called Nowhere, which is the head of a Celestial that, got blown off at some point, and people decided to live inside it. Celestials are giant creatures that have affected the progress of humanity for thousands and thousands of years. They created they went and visited early humanity and created the race of the Eternals and the Deviants, and then came back, to judge them later, and decided that the Deviants were probably a bad idea. So they destroyed the Deviant stronghold, and in the process destroyed Atlantis. And then at one point they showed up, and the gods of the various pantheons got together and said, listen, you don't need to be coming and messing with humanity anymore. And if you do, we're going to have to go to war. And eventually what boiled down to was the Celestials went, they went away, and the gods agreed to not mess with the human destinies anymore. So the various gods from the various pantheons, Olympus, the Olympian, the Asgardian, the Indian, what have you, all sort of backed off. And then, like in the modern age, they showed up again to determine if humanity was worthy to survive. And it was determined that the increase in radiation was stimulating certain genetic traits in them, i.e. mutants. But they were, deemed worthy to survive and then left. And they were so powerful they could wipe out the memory of their visit. That's pretty awesome. And it's a great character thing. It's a great thing that they wrote up. And I thought, when I first read about them, I was like, these are awesome. And I didn't know, I hadn't read any comics with them in it. But eventually when they showed up, I went, oh, I love lore. And comics have lore to them. Games can have lore to them. Anybody who's played Forgotten Realms recognizes that there's a lot of Forgotten Realms lore. Greyhawk, Eberron, any of the game worlds has a lot of lore. And having the ability for people to go research that lore is, and this is going to sound almost counter to the thing I was talking about with Minecraft, with don't pile so much stuff in their way. But I'm not saying pile things in their way, but give things for people to research and discover and find and learn. Because people enjoy that. They enjoy learning this stuff and then coming back later on and going, oh, that is this thing I read about once 2 years ago, and it was amazing, and they can do this and this and this, and they get to feel like they get to feel a certain kind of power from that. And I think that's important as well. So, yeah, my previous ramble was about getting into the simplicity and getting out of the way of players, willingness to create stuff and make stuff. But it's also, there's a path that can be found in allowing it by creating a level of detail and lore for people to learn and organically, to a certain extent, create this lore for people to learn so that they can feel a certain kind of power that comes from knowledge. And, it shouldn't be a thing that you have to have this lore or you can't advance, but it should be something that enhances the experience for someone. I know this thing, so this experience is much more interesting to me now than it was. You can still find the experience interesting without the lore, but that adds this added benefit of perk to the people who put in the effort to learn the lore. Oh. That's my ramble. Went a little longer than I expected, so I'm going to wrap it up. I've got to work relatively early tomorrow, so I'm going to call it there. Subscribe, like, share with all the people, and have a good day. Oh, yeah.